Well, good morning, field trippers. As you remember about the Beatles, they had a song called The Day Tripper, which was somebody who liked to go shopping all day. Well, you people had just spent your days out at the Lab of Ecology, Woodcock Dam, and at the zoo, putting into practice some of the things you learned about in regard to genetic variation, natural selection, and adaptations and evolution. So we're going to bring this to a closure by doing a special project, and we're going to have a fun day today. So this tutorial is going to tell you about the project and how to get it done. But the project's name is the Insectatera project. So let me highlight that for you. Here's the spelling, the Insectatera project. And the whole goal is to talk to me and all the other teachers regarding your knowledge of adaptations that these organisms have that make them successful and make them successful enough that they can survive natural selection and pass on their genetic traits. So, as you can see by the name, we're going to base it on the body plan of an insect. So let's talk a little bit about that. Alright, here's the basic anatomy of an insect. I won't waste your time and read, but sometime you can replay this and read some of this content here. But I'm going to go over some of the things that are key to having in your Insectatera project. As far as the body plan goes, we know that an insect has a head, and that head is what is called cephalized, which means that it has a accumulation of nerves in one location. It's not quite a brain, but it's a group of nerves that control the body, and that's located in the head. And also on the head is that very large compound eye. Something else that an insect has is a thorax, and we talked about how the thorax is really used for locomotion. That's where the legs and the wings as adults are located. Also where the legs are located in the nymphal or larval stages of metamorphosis. And finally, the abdomen. Now the abdomen is really the location of many of the body systems, the organ systems that we talked about. So you're going to want to have these three main parts: the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. But something I want to highlight and talk a little bit about is, I've mentioned it in class but not too much, is along the sides of the body, here, here, and here, of the abdomen are tiny little holes called spiracles, and I have it written right here for you so that you can use this. It could possibly turn in, you could have some kind of variation on the spiracles and have extra large ones so that it could breathe in different locations in the very high altitudes. But the spiracles are where they exchange the gases. The carbon dioxide and the oxygen are exchanged through those spiracles. So again, you can take any of these body parts and specialize them and turn them into an adaptation that makes them survive in their particular biome or their conditions that they live in. So go ahead and read through this page, and then we're going to continue on talking more about mouth parts now, because mouth parts are pretty unique. So let's take a look at some mouth parts here. Ew. If you take a look, each different type of mouth part found on an insect is for a specific job of helping it get its food or protecting it. And there's a variety, a plethora, well, how you like that word, plethora, of things that you can, variations that you can make on these mouth parts. Now we have sucking mouth parts, which are usually long proboscis, or singular proboscis, where like the butterfly unravels that long tube and suckles into nectar on the nectaries on the flowers. The cicada also has a sucking mouth part, which is more shorter and for piercing seeds, and they secrete an enzyme and they pierce seeds and they suck the fats and oils out of the seeds. Now lapping mouth parts are for picking up fluids, like you'll see flies on things and it grosses you out, where they're using these lapping mouth parts here to pick up any of the fluids that are on the food that you have out on the table when you're having a picnic. So that's pretty gross. And grasshoppers' mouths are made for, they have these little mandibles here that pick up the grass and hold the blade so they can chew the blade of grass. And then the beetle has some very aggressive chewing mouth parts because the beetle will eat other, it's kind of carnivorous and eats other insects. So you can turn any one of these into some kind of monsterish kind of adaptation that you could have some fun with. So you want to have some specific mouth parts on your Insectatera. So in review, let's go back here. The basic body plan of your Insectatera needs to have a head, a thorax, an abdomen, a pair of wings, and some type of mouth part. So that's the basic body plan. And I'm not going to speak too much more to that because you can read through those pages as you go through this tutorial. Now I'd like to start, because we spoke a lot and I brought in samples of live samples and some preserved samples that I collected last summer in streams. But we talked a lot about aquatic insects. And we talked about how they go through their metamorphic process. We talked about complete and incomplete metamorphosis, and I'm not going to get into that because you can look in your notebook for that. But here's some of the specific insect adaptations that they have at various stages. Now, in particular, the larvae, because they live in water, these aquatic insects, my favorite here is the caddisfly, and it builds this little stone house or retreat that it lives in out of pebbles and materials on the substrate or the floor of the stream, and it anchors itself inside of that as a protective, but it also serves as a retreat for predators, where when the predator comes by you can either retreat into it or hide in it, wait for the predator to get the predator. Something else that aquatic insects have is, in their nymphal and larval forms, is gills. Now you could make your Insectatera into one of these nymphal or larval forms. It doesn't have to be an adult because they have the same body parts as you can see here. Let me highlight again. Here's your head, and you can have a specialized head of some kind. We have the abdomen, or excuse me, the thorax with the legs attached, and finally you have the abdomen here. Let me pick a different color. I've been using the same colors the whole time. Let's pick red for the abdomen here. You can see the abdomen, and the abdomen has these two large spines that help it protect itself and move through the water. The only thing you're going to be missing if you use if you use the nymphal or larval forms of the insect, is you're going to be missing wings, and that's okay to do. That's okay to do. And here's another adaptation: is the shapes that these take on. Now you might want to avoid using this as an example, but I just wanted to put it in here as an example for you to see and recall. Remember the water pennies kind of shaped like a disc, but it's very hard to identify. Some of these aquatic insects don't have very identifiable head, thorax, abdomen in the larval stage, so you want to stick to making sure that your Insectatera, nymph, or larva, if you decide to go that route, has a head, thorax, and abdomen. And finally, we talked a little bit about wings in the adult stage, because remember, the sole goal of all biological organisms is to reproduce, and the wings help it colonize and stay together and get to where it needs to be if it happens to get downstream in its larval stage, to get back upstream and recolonize. Alright, I'd just like to mention this. This is something that you could bring up in as a behavioral adaptation if you wanted to. We talked about metamorphosis in the phases. Maybe you're instead of having 4 phases or 3 phases like incomplete and complete do, maybe you could have just 2 phases, and maybe there you could talk about having a specialized type of metamorphosis. So let me write that out here for you. Metamorphosis. And you could have a specialized type of metamorphosis, and again, like I said, maybe it can only have 2 phases so that it gets to the reproductive adult phase sooner, which would allow the population to expand at a lot faster rate. And something else you could have your Insectatera do is we talked about these retreats, and this is made by another type of caddisfly, which is my favorite aquatic insect. If you don't think that's too weird to have a favorite aquatic insect, I guess it is kind of bizarre. But anyway, these are called nets, and these nets are made by the caddisfly, and you can see here the opening, and they retreat into there, hide from predators, but they also wait to ambush predators from that. So that's something that you could make a twist on and use your creativity to talk about a behavioral and a physical adaptation there. Now, we brought in a lot of other organisms besides the aquatic insects, and I want to just touch on them a little bit, because even though some of these don't apply, these adaptations don't apply to real insects, you could use your creative powers again to create some of these or recreate some of these adaptations I'm going to talk about with your Insectatera. For example, you could have, now most insects don't asexually reproduce, or actually no insects asexually reproduce, but maybe you could have here, you see in the green hydra that it has asexual budding that it does. Maybe your Insectatera could do some of that, and that would be fine. It's not, remember, we're making a make-believe insect, but we're basing it as much on true life as possible. So that's something that you could do. And also, maybe your Insectatera, the hydra excretes that sticky fluids to fix themselves to rocks because they're a sessile animal that doesn't have any way to move, and they need to attach themselves someplace so they can get their predators or get their food. But maybe you could have yours excrete a sticky fluid that they lay out around themselves and catches the prey that way. So again, you can take something from a completely non-insect organism and apply it to your Insectatera. So I'm just going to mention the names of these organisms, like the Daphnia, and you can read about its adaptations that we learned in class. Remember the planarian, and of course the water bearer tardigrade that we saw. One I wanted to mention here was the cryptobiosis, which I spelled wrong there, and I'm sorry, that means a P in it. But the cryptobiosis, the extreme dormancy, maybe at the end of the reproductive cycle of your insects, they lay eggs that are similar to the Daphnia's Ephippia eggs that we talked about, which go into an extreme dormancy. So that's up to you. You can use these different adaptations to apply to yours, to your Insectatera. Now that we've talked about what the Insectatera is to look like and what the Insectatera, how it's to have adaptations, let's talk about the schedule of the day. Okay, so what you're going to do this morning, the first thing is you're going to brainstorm. And you can brainstorm with some people around you and plan what your Insectatera will look like. And remember those 3 anatomical body parts: the head, the thorax, the abdomen. Most have wings. You don't have to, but most have wings. And some type of mouth part. Second thing you're going to do is you're going to use these nets. They're going to be given to you by your teachers, and you're going to cut them out. I'd color them first if you're going to, because it's a little hard to color once you glue the nets together, but one's going to be used for the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Now you're going to have to do some mathematical work. Those math teachers, you know, they're going to whip you into shape, so they're going to take these polyhedral shapes, and they want the surface area and number of edges and number of faces included in there. So you're going to have to do some of that work and submit that to the math teachers. So after your brainstorming is done and your nets have been built and colored, you're ready to glue your Insectatera together. So you're going to glue them together. We're going to have glue guns available for you. And then you're going to have to talk about appendages. You're going to have to make some decisions. Are you going to have wings? You're most definitely going to have 6 legs, because that's important. You're going to have some antennae, and you're going to have some unique mouth parts and eyes. All of these, by the way, can be adjusted in such a way that you make it into an adaptation. So those are the first 3 steps, and basically that's your morning, okay? And these steps are to be completed by lunch. So by lunch you're going to be walking out of the room and having your little Insectatera built, because when you come back you're going to do some writing. So let's talk about the writing. Okay, it's after lunch, time for some writing. I've got a map here for you to follow, and in the map, your intro. We want you to talk to us about the scientific name, and you remember the scientific name is 2 parts. It has the first name capitalized, second name lowercase, and you're going to tell us about the basic anatomy of your Insectatera. And you don't have to get too much detail in that first paragraph regarding the adaptations, because you're going to do that in the body paragraph, one of the body paragraphs. Speaking of body paragraphs, the first body paragraph, what you're going to write in there is you're going to talk to me about 2 selective pressures. We've talked about selective pressures. They're what are the mechanism behind natural selection. They're the what put pressure on the organism, and those with the correct adaptations are going to survive. So you're going to talk about the environmental conditions that they live in. Maybe they live in a very dark area and have to have extraordinarily large eyes. So that could be something you could talk about. You're going to describe the biome, and Mrs. Birchtold and Mrs. Benoit have talked to you about biomes, so you're going to talk about the biome where your Insectatera lives and what those conditions are like. And finally, in the third body paragraph, that's where we talk about the scientific adaptations. And I'm going to be pretty lenient with that. I want either 2 adaptations that are physical, or 2 that are behavioral, or you can have them be combos. And I gave you several examples. You can have mouth part adaptations, you can have head thorax abdomen adaptations, you can have extraordinarily large wings for hovering and flying faster to catch certain kinds of prey. It's up to you. The sky's the limit. And lastly, you're going to do a closure where you're going to restate the name of the Insectatera and its adaptations. Well, I hope this has been useful to you, and if you have any questions, just ask the teacher you're with, and they'll help you get through it. So have an enjoyable day.